What you're about to hear is going to completely blow your mind and change everything you thought you knew about what went down backstage at Survivor Series in San Diego, because while everyone was focused on what was happening inside the arena with all the matches and the drama playing out on camera, something absolutely insane was unfolding in the backstage area that nobody saw coming and that WWE tried desperately to keep quiet until they were ready to reveal it on their own terms. Seth Rollins, the man who's been out of action for months recovering from a serious knee injury that everyone thought would keep him sidelined until at least early next year, suddenly appeared backstage at Survivor Series completely unannounced and immediately launched a vicious attack on Bron Breakker that had security scrambling and officials panicking and the entire production team thrown into complete chaos. This wasn't some accident, this wasn't a leak, this wasn't Seth going rogue and showing up without permission, this was a carefully calculated move orchestrated by Triple H himself as part of a master plan that's going to have massive implications for the War Games match and for multiple storylines going forward. If you think you understand what's happening right now, I promise you don't have the full picture yet, and if you click away from this video before I reveal every detail of Triple H's genius strategy, you're going to be completely lost when this all plays out over the next few weeks. And make sure you hit that subscribe button right now because we're the only channel that's going to give you the real behind-the-scenes story of what's actually happening in WWE, not just the surface-level stuff that everyone else is reporting but the deep insider information that explains why things are happening and what it all means for the future. Survivor Series weekend was already one of the most anticipated events of the entire year with massive matches scheduled and huge storylines coming to a head, the kind of event that wrestling fans circle on their calendars months in advance and clear their schedules to make sure they don't miss a single moment. The card was stacked from top to bottom with dream matches and grudge matches and championship defenses that all felt equally important and compelling. The energy in San Diego was electric even before the show started, with fans flooding into the arena wearing their favorite wrestlers' merchandise and buzzing with excitement about what they were going to witness. But nobody walking into that arena or watching from home had any idea that the biggest moment of the weekend, the thing that would dominate conversation in social media and wrestling news sites for days afterward, might happen in a backstage hallway rather than inside the ring where cameras could capture every angle and announcers could narrate what was happening. The production team was dealing with all the normal stress and logistics of running a major premium live event, the kind of organized chaos that happens behind the scenes at every big WWE show but gets multiplied by 10 when it's one of their marquee events. There were dozens of moving pieces to coordinate, making sure everything was timed perfectly down to the second, coordinating all the different segments and matches so that the show flowed smoothly from one moment to the next, managing the various personalities and egos involved, which is always a delicate balancing act when you have a locker room full of competitive athletes and performers who all think they should be getting more spotlight. The production trucks were monitoring multiple camera feeds simultaneously, the audio team was making sure every entrance theme and every microphone was working properly, the lighting crew was prepared for all the different moods and atmospheres each segment required. Extra security personnel had been positioned near the restricted area behind the gorilla position throughout the day, which is the area right behind the entrance curtain where wrestlers wait before going out to the ring and where officials and producers gather to give last-minute instructions and make sure everyone knows their cues. At first, nobody thought anything of the extra security presence, people just assumed it was standard protocol for a big event where crowd control and safety are always concerns, or maybe there was worry about media members or overeager fans trying to get into restricted areas where they didn't belong. Security at these events is always tight, but for the Big Four premium live events WWE tends to be even more cautious, making sure that nothing goes wrong and that talent is protected from any potential issues. Then Seth Rollins walked in through a side entrance that's normally reserved for upper-level management and special guests, not in his wrestling gear with his entrance music playing and pyrotechnics going off, not with any fanfare or announcement or hint that something big was about to happen, just Seth in casual street clothes wearing a black hoodie pulled up over his head with his knee still visibly wrapped in a brace and bandages from the injury that's kept him out of action for what feels like forever to fans who've been desperate to see him return. People who were in that area at the time said the entire hallway just went completely silent when they saw him, like someone had pressed a mute button on reality. Conversations that had been happening stopped mid-sentence with people's mouths literally hanging open, heads turned in unison toward this unexpected figure. Everyone was completely shocked and confused because Seth wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this event or any WWE event for that matter. He's supposed to be at home continuing his rehabilitation program, working with physical therapists and trainers to strengthen his knee and make sure it heals properly so he doesn't risk re-injuring it when he eventually returns to the ring. He's supposed to be doing the boring, unglamorous work of recovery that happens far away from cameras and crowds, the endless hours of exercises and stretches and treatments that most fans never see or think about. He's definitely not supposed to be showing up unannounced at one of WWE's biggest events of the year looking like he's ready to get physical with someone. One person who was there described it as feeling like a ghost had just materialized out of thin air. That's how unexpected and surreal it was to see Seth Rollins standing there in that hallway when everyone knew he was injured and nowhere near ready to return. But Seth wasn't there to shake hands or catch up with old friends or make a casual social appearance to show support for his colleagues. His body language made it immediately clear that he was there with a specific purpose, with a mission that he was completely focused on executing regardless of who was around or what the consequences might be. His jaw was set, his eyes were scanning the hallway looking for something or someone, his entire demeanor radiated intensity and determination. Right there in that same hallway just a few feet away was Bron Breakker, the young powerhouse who's been positioned as one of WWE's brightest rising stars and one of the most dangerous competitors in the War Games match. Breakker was in the middle of a conversation with some officials and producers about his role in the match, going over the details of when he would enter the cage and what spots were planned and how the finish was supposed to work. Breakker looked up from his conversation and saw Seth standing there, his expression immediately showing confusion about why Rollins was even present at the event when everyone knew about his injury status. There was a split second where their eyes met across the hallway, a moment of recognition and tension, and before anyone could process what was about to happen or step in to prevent it, Seth just exploded forward with shocking speed for someone who's supposed to have a bad knee. He charged at full speed directly at Breakker and tackled him with all his weight, driving Bron backward into a stack of equipment crates that were lined up against the wall. The impact was tremendous and echoed through the concrete hallway, the sound of bodies crashing into steel loud enough that people in adjacent areas came running to see what was happening. Equipment went flying in different directions as the crates toppled over from the force of the collision, pieces of staging and technical gear scattering across the floor creating even more chaos. Breakker, to his credit, immediately tried to fight back and defend himself rather than just taking the attack, his wrestling instincts kicking in as he attempted to get his hands on Seth and reverse the situation. But Seth's aggression was overwhelming and relentless, fueled by something that looked way more personal and genuine than anything related to a scripted storyline or a worked angle. He was throwing punches and knees with real force, going after Bron with an intensity that made everyone watching extremely uncomfortable because it didn't look like the kind of controlled choreographed fighting that happens in wrestling. It looked like a real fight between two people who genuinely wanted to hurt each other. Within seconds, the security team that had been strategically positioned nearby earlier in the day came rushing in from multiple directions to separate them, suddenly making sense of why there had been extra security in that area when normally it wouldn't be necessary. It took at least 5 large security guards to pull Seth and Bron apart, with 2 guards grabbing Seth's arms and shoulders and physically dragging him backward while 3 others formed a barrier between the 2 men and helped Breakker get back to his feet. Even as they were being separated, both men were still trying to get at each other, straining against the people holding them back, yelling things at each other that couldn't quite be made out over all the commotion but were clearly heated and personal. Producers were yelling at the top of their lungs, trying to restore some sense of order to the situation, trying to get everyone to calm down and back away and let cooler heads prevail. Officials rushed in from all directions trying to figure out what had just happened and how to handle it, whether this was part of some elaborate plan they hadn't been informed about or if this was a legitimate altercation that was going to create problems and potential liability issues. Other talent who had been nearby and witnessed the whole thing developing just stood there stunned and frozen, not knowing if what they'd just seen was part of some incredibly realistic worked angle that WWE had put together without telling most people about it, or if they'd just witnessed a legitimate backstage altercation between 2 wrestlers that could have serious professional and legal consequences. Seth and Bron were pulled in opposite directions down different hallways by security and officials who wanted to create as much physical distance between them as possible to make sure the situation didn't escalate any further. Both men were still visibly heated and angry even as they were being moved away from the scene, still yelling at each other even though they couldn't see each other anymore and were being taken to completely separate areas of the backstage. The entire incident from start to finish probably lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like time had slowed down to everyone who witnessed it, their brains struggling to process what had just happened and what it might mean for the rest of the show and for the relationships and power dynamics backstage. The immediate question burning through everyone's mind was why would Seth Rollins, who's supposed to be injured and recovering and nowhere near ready to compete, suddenly show up unannounced at Survivor Series and launch an unprovoked attack on Bron Breakker, who he has absolutely no storyline history or connection with? Why would this happen just hours before one of the biggest matches of the year when everyone should be focused on their roles and responsibilities for the show? And what does any of this mean for the War Games match that's going to be the main event and the centerpiece of the entire Survivor Series card? These questions were being asked in hushed, urgent conversations all over the backstage area as word spread about what had just happened. Seth's injury status has been one of the most closely guarded secrets and most frustrating mysteries in WWE for the past several months, with very little official information being released about the severity of the injury or the expected timeline for his return. He suffered what was reported as a significant knee injury that required surgical intervention and an extensive rehabilitation process, the kind of injury that can end careers if not handled properly and that requires patience and discipline to recover from completely. The internal timeline that WWE's medical staff gave for his potential return was late this year at the absolute earliest, or more realistically sometime in the first quarter of next year, meaning early winter or spring before he could possibly be cleared to compete again. Seth wasn't supposed to be anywhere near a wrestling ring or a WWE event or any situation where he might be tempted or pressured to do something physical that could compromise his recovery. He wasn't supposed to be traveling with the roster or showing up backstage at shows or getting involved in any kind of physical altercation, whether worked or shoot, let alone getting into an actual fight with another wrestler in a backstage area. Even top-level talent and established main roster stars who'd been with the company for years reportedly had no idea that Seth was going to be in San Diego for Survivor Series, which suggests that Triple H and the very small inner circle of WWE management kept this plan incredibly confidential and on a strict need-to-know basis to maximize the shock value and surprise factor when it actually happened. People who saw Seth backstage after he'd been separated from Bron and taken to a private area said he looked completely focused and determined, not like someone who was there for social reasons or to hang out with friends or to watch the show from a good seat. He looked like a man on a specific mission who had come to accomplish something particular and wasn't going to be distracted or deterred from that goal regardless of what obstacles or consequences stood in his way. He didn't have the relaxed casual energy of someone who's there to enjoy themselves or catch up with colleagues. He had the intense purposeful energy of someone who's operating on a plan and executing each step methodically. He didn't look like a guy coming back to wrestle and entertain. He looked like someone coming to make a statement and send a message that would reverberate through WWE and change the trajectory of multiple storylines. But here's where it gets really interesting and where Triple H's fingerprints start becoming visible all over this situation. If Seth isn't medically cleared to compete and physically can't actually wrestle in matches right now without risking serious brain injury or long-term damage to his knee, why would Triple H authorize or encourage him to come to Survivor Series, and why would he allow or facilitate Seth getting physical with Bron Breakker in a way that could potentially aggravate his injury? The answer reveals the brilliance and sophistication of Triple H's booking strategy and his understanding of how to create compelling television and unpredictable moments without necessarily needing everyone involved to actually compete in matches. This isn't about having Seth wrestle or bump or take any physical risks with his injured knee. This is about using Seth's presence and the shock factor of his unexpected return to create chaos and unpredictability and viral moments heading into the War Games match. Triple H understands something fundamental about modern wrestling and entertainment, that sometimes the anticipation and the possibility of something happening is just as valuable if not more valuable than the thing actually happening. Sometimes the threat of interference or the potential for someone to show up is enough to create the tension and drama that makes a match feel special and unpredictable. Triple H is constructing something really sophisticated here that goes beyond just booking matches and putting together a card. He's crafting moments and building narratives that will pay off over weeks and months rather than just over the course of one night or one show. Having Seth Rollins return without actually wrestling or competing in matches allows WWE to generate massive buzz and create viral moments and dominate social media conversation without putting Seth's health at risk by having him compete before he's genuinely ready and medically cleared. The attack on Bron Breakker accomplishes multiple strategic objectives simultaneously, all of which serve WWE's interests and Triple H's long-term creative vision for how these characters and storylines should develop. First, it creates immediate drama and gets people talking not just about what happened but about what it means and what might happen next, generating the kind of organic conversation and speculation that money can't buy and that's far more valuable than any scripted promo or angle could create. Second, it plants seeds for a future feud between Seth and Bron that can be developed and built over time when Seth is actually cleared to compete and ready to work a full program with someone. Third, and perhaps most importantly for Survivor Series specifically, it creates a wild card element and an air of unpredictability heading into the War Games match that makes the outcome feel less predetermined and more genuinely uncertain. The question of why Seth specifically targeted Bron Breakker rather than any of the other wrestlers who were backstage or any of the other people involved in the War Games match is absolutely crucial to understanding the larger strategic plan that Triple H has put together. Seth and Bron have no real history together as characters, they've never feuded or had meaningful interactions, they're not connected to the same storylines or the same parts of the WWE universe, they exist in almost completely separate bubbles within the company's ecosystem. So why would Seth's first significant action upon returning to WWE be to attack this particular person rather than going after someone he has established history and unfinished business with like Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes or any number of other wrestlers he's been connected to over the years? The answer becomes clear when you think about what Bron Breakker represents within the context of the War Games match and within WWE's current landscape. Breakker is the biggest physical threat and the most unpredictable explosive element inside that cage, the guy who can change the entire momentum and complexion of a match in seconds with his raw power and freakish athletic ability. He's the young powerhouse who's being actively positioned by WWE as a future main event star and potentially a future face of the company, someone they're investing heavily in and protecting carefully as they build his credibility and his resume. He's the wild card competitor who doesn't have years of experience and predictable patterns, which makes him dangerous in the best possible way because nobody quite knows what he's capable of or what he might do in any given situation. By attacking Breakker before the match even happens, Seth plants doubt and distraction and psychological warfare in Bron's mind heading into one of the biggest and most important matches of his still relatively young career. Instead of being completely focused on the task at hand and his role within his team's carefully planned strategy, instead of being in the zone mentally preparing for the physical war he's about to enter, Breakker now has to deal with the mental burden and distraction of wondering why Seth attacked him specifically. Was it personal or strategic? Is Seth going to interfere during the match? What does this mean for his immediate future and his position in WWE? Is he going to have to deal with Seth coming after him again when he's vulnerable? That mental distraction becomes a significant strategic advantage for the opposing team in the War Games match, because a distracted Bron breaker is immeasurably less effective and less dangerous Bron breaker. A competitor who's looking over their shoulder or thinking about issues outside the match or dealing with anger and confusion is someone who might make mistakes or lose focus at crucial moments because their mental energy is divided rather than being completely concentrated on the task immediately in front of them. In a match as chaotic and demanding as War Games, where split-second decisions and constant awareness of your surroundings can mean the difference between winning and losing, having one of your key players mentally compromised even slightly can be devastating to your team's chances. This also creates a situation where Triple H can use Seth's presence and the threat of Seth's involvement during the actual War Games match without actually having Seth physically participate in the match itself or take any bumps or put his injured knee at any risk whatsoever. Picture this scenario playing out: the match is in full swing with all the violence and chaos and drama that War Games is famous for delivering. Both teams are giving everything they have, bodies are being thrown into steel cage walls, weapons are being used, blood might be flowing, the crowd is going absolutely insane reacting to every near fall and every big spot. The momentum might be shifting back and forth between the teams, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, Seth Rollins' entrance music hits. The familiar sound of his theme song fills the arena and the entire building would absolutely explode with shock and excitement. The crowd would leap to their feet screaming, everyone in attendance and watching at home would turn their attention toward the entrance ramp expecting to see Seth walk out. More importantly and more strategically valuable for WWE's purposes, all the wrestlers inside and around the War Games cage would be completely distracted for those crucial seconds, turning toward the entrance, trying to see if Seth is actually coming out, losing focus on their opponents and on the match itself. Bron Breakker especially would be mentally taken out of the match for that moment, fixated on whether the man who attacked him earlier is about to get involved in his match. That split second of distraction and confusion and divided attention could be absolutely all it takes for the momentum and outcome of the match to shift dramatically in one team's favor. While Breakker and potentially others on his team are looking toward the entrance and dealing with the mental disruption of Seth's music hitting, their opponents could capitalize on that momentary advantage to hit a big move or set up a finishing sequence or gain a positional advantage inside the cage that leads directly to the match ending. One team's focus and unity remains intact while the other team fractures even just briefly, and in a match as evenly matched and tightly contested as War Games is designed to be, that brief advantage is enough to determine the winner. The absolute beauty and genius of this strategy is that Seth doesn't have to take a single bump or throw a single punch or put his injured knee at any risk whatsoever to accomplish this goal. All he has to do is appear, whether that means actually walking out onto the entrance stage and standing there for a few seconds, or appearing on the video screen in a pre-recorded segment, or literally just having his entrance music play over the sound system without him appearing at all. The psychological impact and the distraction factor would be functionally identical regardless of which approach WWE chooses to take, creating the opening and opportunity for one team to capitalize while their opponents are mentally elsewhere dealing with the Seth Rollins situation. This is absolutely textbook Triple H strategy and philosophy when it comes to wrestling booking, understanding that presence and psychology and the power of anticipation can be just as effective and sometimes more effective than actual physical action. Using the threat and possibility of interference rather than actual interference, using someone's aura and reputation rather than their in-ring work, these are the kinds of sophisticated storytelling techniques that separate good bookers from truly great ones. Triple H learned from the best during his own career, working with people like Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels who understood the mental and psychological dimensions of wrestling just as well as they understood the physical dimensions. WWE has successfully done this exact kind of thing before with other wrestlers who weren't cleared to compete but could still appear on television and contribute meaningfully to storylines and shows without actually wrestling. The Rock has done countless segments and promos and confrontations over the years without actually having matches, using his presence and his star power to elevate storylines and create buzz. Randy Orton appeared on television for months doing interviews and backstage segments and confrontations before he was medically cleared to return to actual in-ring competition after his various injuries. CM Punk had an entire run where he was heavily involved in major storylines and appeared regularly on television without competing in actual matches during certain periods. Becky Lynch has done angles where her presence and her promos drove stories forward even when she wasn't actively wrestling every week. WWE's creative team and production staff know exactly how to use talent effectively and maximize their value even when those performers can't or shouldn't be physically competing in matches for whatever reason. And with someone as naturally over with audiences and as important to WWE's history and identity as Seth Rollins, his mere presence at an event or his music hitting or his face appearing on screen is enough to move television ratings and create viral social media moments and generate the kind of buzz that translates directly into business success. Seth doesn't need to wrestle to be valuable to WWE right now, he just needs to exist in their universe and interact with their storylines in strategic, carefully planned ways. The timing of this entire situation is also incredibly calculated and deliberate rather than being random or coincidental. By having Seth attack Bron right before Survivor Series and mere hours before the War Games match itself, Triple H ensures that this storyline and this tension will be absolutely fresh in everyone's mind during the match. It won't be something that happened weeks ago that people have to be reminded about through video packages, it will be something that literally just occurred that same day or that same show, making it feel immediate and urgent and impossible to ignore. Fans watching the War Games match will be constantly wondering if and when Seth is going to show up or get involved somehow. Wrestlers in the match will be mentally dealing with that possibility whether they want to admit it or not. Commentary can reference the earlier attack and the tension throughout their call of the match-building anticipation. It creates this undercurrent of anticipation and unpredictability that runs through the entire War Games match and makes it feel less scripted and more genuinely chaotic and uncertain. Even fans who understand that wrestling is predetermined and that outcomes are decided in advance will find themselves genuinely unsure about what's going to happen because the Seth Rollins factor introduces an element that feels unpredictable and dangerous. That's incredibly valuable for making wrestling feel special and exciting rather than feeling like you're just watching actors go through predetermined motions. It makes the show feel alive and reactive and full of possibilities. There's also this absolutely fascinating dynamic of how this situation potentially helps Roman Reigns and his team in the War Games match, even though Seth has absolutely no stated intention of helping Roman and certainly hasn't been positioned as Roman's ally in any way. Seth and Roman have this incredibly complex layered history as former Shield brothers who've been rivals and enemies and reluctant allies at various points over the past decade. They've main event WrestleManias against each other, they've teamed together to win tag team championships, they've cut promos about their brotherhood and their mutual respect and their competitive drive to prove who's better. The Shield legacy and what it means to each of them individually is this thread that runs through so much of WWE's storytelling over the past 10 years. If Seth's distraction or interference or whatever form his involvement takes during the War Games match ends up benefiting Roman's team by causing Bron or other members of the opposing team to lose focus or make mistakes, that creates all these fascinating storytelling possibilities and questions going forward. Did Seth intend to help Roman or was it purely coincidental and accidental? Does Roman feel like he owes Seth anything now or does he view it as Seth pursuing his own agenda that happened to align with Roman's interests in that moment? How does this affect their relationship going forward and whether they might work together or continue being rivals? Does this plant seeds for a Shield reunion or does it create new tensions because Roman doesn't want Seth's help and wants to succeed on his own terms without owing anyone anything? Make sure you're subscribed to this channel and have notifications turned on because we're going to be tracking every single development in this story as it unfolds over the coming weeks and months, and we'll be bringing you insider information and analysis that you won't find anywhere else. Seth Rollins returning to WWE in any capacity is a massive deal that affects the entire landscape of the company, and the way Triple H is methodically building toward his full return with these strategic appearances and calculated moments of chaos shows the level of thought and long-term planning that's going into WWE's creative direction right now under his leadership. War Games is going to be absolutely wild and unpredictable with the added element of potential Seth Rollins involvement hanging over the entire match like a storm cloud, and the fallout from Survivor Series is going to set up storylines and rivalries that will carry WWE through the end of this year and deep into WrestleMania season next year when everything comes to a head.